The emergency room fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Flores cradled her 20-month-old daughter Maya against her chest, feeling the toddler's unnaturally limp body rise and fall with shallow breaths. Maya's usually bright brown eyes were glazed and unfocused, rolling back occasionally in a way that made Flores' stomach lurch with terror. The antiseptic smell of the hospital mixed with the metallic taste of fear that had been coating her tongue since she'd found Maya unconscious in her crib 3 hours ago. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we're going to need to run some tests," Dr. Patricia Chen said, her voice carefully measured as she approached with a clipboard. The pediatric emergency physician had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, but Flores could see the concern etched in the lines around them. Maya's presenting symptoms, the lethargy, dilated pupils, and respiratory depression, suggest possible ingestion of a controlled substance. Flores felt the words hit her like physical blows. Controlled substance? That's impossible. She's a baby. She doesn't even know how to open childproof caps. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed her lips to Maya's forehead, feeling the fever that had spiked in the ambulance. The soft brown curls that usually bounced when Maya toddled around were now damp with sweat, clinging to her pale skin. The nurse, a middle-aged woman with gentle hands named Carmen, began setting up an IV line while Dr. Chen continued her explanation. "We'll need blood and urine samples to determine exactly what's in her system. Given her age and the severity of symptoms, we're also required to contact Child Protective Services as a precautionary measure." "CPS?" Flores' husband Miguel looked up from where he'd been pacing near the window, his work clothes still dusty from the construction site where he'd been when she called him, screaming and sobbing into the phone. His normally steady hands shook as he ran them through his black hair. Dr. Chen held up a calming hand. "We're not making any accusations. This is standard protocol when a child this young presents with these symptoms. Our job is to make sure Maya gets the best care possible and that we understand how this happened." Flores closed her eyes, trying to piece together the morning that had started so normally. She'd dropped Maya off at her sister-in-law Carmen's house at 7:30, just like every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months. Carmen Rodriguez, not to be confused with the nurse, had insisted on watching Maya while Flores worked her shifts at the dental office, claiming it would be good practice since she and Miguel's brother Tony were trying to have children of their own. Carmen lived in the newer subdivision across town in one of those cookie-cutter houses with beige siding and perfectly manicured lawns. She decorated Maya's temporary nursery with expensive toys and organic cotton everything, always making subtle comments about how Flores could upgrade Maya's diet and sleeping arrangements. "You know, Flores," she'd say with that patronizing smile, "studies show that toddlers who nap in complete darkness develop better sleep patterns. And that formula you're using? There are much more nutritious options available." The memory of this morning played in Flores' mind like a broken record. Carmen had been waiting at the door in her matching pajama set because, of course, Carmen wore matching pajamas, with her blonde hair already perfectly styled despite the early hour. She'd taken Maya from Flores' arms with an odd smile, something different in her green eyes that Flores couldn't quite identify at the time. "Don't worry about picking her up early today," Carmen had said, adjusting the designer diaper bag on her shoulder. "I have some new activities planned. Maya and I are going to have a very educational day together." Flores thought it was strange, but hadn't pressed. Carmen was always talking about educational activities and developmental milestones, armed with parenting books and online articles that she quoted like scripture. As a dental hygienist with no children of her own yet, Carmen seemed determined to prove she knew more about child rearing than anyone in the family. Now, watching her daughter struggle to keep her eyes open while medical professionals discussed blood tests and child protective services, those words took on a sinister meaning that made Flores' hands tremble. "When did you last see Maya?" Dr. Chen asked, making notes on her chart. "This morning at 7:30. I dropped her at my sister-in-law's house before work. She was completely normal, chattering, trying to sing along to the radio, excited to see her stuffed elephant that Carmen keeps there for her." Flores' voice grew stronger as she focused on the details. "When I picked her up at 4:30, Carmen said Maya had been extra fussy and had taken a long nap. She looked tired, but I thought maybe she was getting sick." Miguel moved closer to the bed, his calloused hands gentle as he touched Maya's tiny fingers. She fell asleep in the car seat, which isn't unusual, but when we got home, we couldn't wake her up for dinner. She loves her dinner. Usually she's banging her spoon and making a mess. When she wouldn't even drink her milk, he trailed off, unable to finish. Dr. Chen nodded, making more notes. And you brought her directly here? I tried everything first, Flores said, guilt washing over her. I thought maybe she was just exhausted. I gave her a lukewarm bath, tried to get her to drink some water, but her eyes kept rolling back and she felt so hot, and then she started making these weird breathing sounds. She demonstrated the shallow, irregular breathing that had sent her into full panic mode. The automatic doors to the emergency room swished open, and Flores looked up to see two women in professional attire walking purposefully toward their room. One was African American, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, carrying a leather briefcase. The other was younger, Latina, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that reminded Flores's of her own mother. Mrs. Rodriguez? I'm Sandra Williams from Child Protective Services, and this is my colleague, Maria Santos. We're here to help figure out what happened to Maya. Flores felt Miguel tense beside her, but Sandra's voice carried no accusation, only professional concern. We understand this is an incredibly difficult time for your family. Our role isn't to blame anyone, but to ensure Maya's safety and get to the bottom of how she ingested whatever substance is making her sick. Maria Santos stepped forward with a gentle smile. I have a daughter about Maya's age. I can only imagine how terrifying this must be for you both. As if sensing the presence of more people in the room, Maya stirred slightly, making a soft, whimpering sound that broke Flores's heart. She adjusted her hold, supporting Maya's head, as the toddler's eyes flickered open briefly before closing again. The blood work will take about an hour to process. In the meantime, I'd like to go over Maya's medical history and get a detailed timeline of her day. Flores began recounting every detail she could remember, from Maya's breakfast of oatmeal with bananas to the book they'd read before leaving for Carmen's house. As she spoke, she noticed Sandra and Maria exchanging glances, making their own notes. Tell us about your sister-in-law, Maria said carefully. How long has she been watching Maya? About 6 months, Miguel answered. She volunteered when Flores went back to work. Carmen doesn't have kids yet, but she's always been intense about parenting theories. She reads all these books, follows mommy bloggers, that kind of thing. Sandra nodded. Has she ever expressed concerns about your parenting methods? Flores and Miguel looked at each other. It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. Carmen had never directly criticized them, but her suggestions were constant and increasingly condescending.
She makes a lot of suggestions, Flores said diplomatically, about Maya's diet, her sleep schedule, the toys we buy. She means well, I think. She has very strong opinions about how children should be raised. The IV drip began delivering fluids into Maya's tiny arm, and Carmen the nurse, the irony of the shared name wasn't lost on Flores, adjusted the flow rate while monitoring Maya's vital signs. Her heart rate is stabilizing, she reported to Dr. Chen. Blood pressure is still elevated but improving. Dr. Chen checked her watch. The preliminary toxicology screen should be ready soon. Depending on what we find, we may need to administer specific antidotes or supportive care. As they waited, Flores found herself studying every person in the room, looking for signs of judgment or suspicion. She'd never imagined being in a situation where her fitness as a mother would be questioned, where strangers would meet to investigate whether she had harmed her own child. The fluorescent lights continued their incessant buzzing, creating an atmosphere of surreal tension that made everything feel like a bad dream she couldn't wake up from. Maya's breathing grew slightly more regular, though she remained unconscious. Flores whispered soft words in Spanish, the lullabies her own grandmother had sung to her, hoping somehow her voice would reach through whatever fog was clouding her daughter's mind. The automatic doors swished again, and Dr. Chen returned with a lab technician carrying a sealed envelope. Flores held her breath as the doctor opened it, her expression growing increasingly serious as she read the results. The blood test shows significant levels of diphenhydramine in Maya's system. That's the active ingredient in Benadryl and other antihistamine medications. At the levels we're seeing, this would cause exactly the symptoms Maya has been experiencing. Flores felt the world tilt around her. Benadryl? But why would Maya have Benadryl in her system? She doesn't have allergies, and we've never given her any medication except children's Tylenol, so teething. Sandra Williams leaned forward slightly. Who had access to Maya today besides yourselves? Just Carmen, Miguel said, his voice tight with growing realization. She was the only one watching Maya today. Maria Santos was already pulling out her phone. We'll need to speak with your sister-in-law immediately. Dr. Chen, what's the medical significance of these levels? Dr. Chen's expression was grave. At this concentration and given Maya's age and weight, this could have been fatal if left untreated. We're talking about a dose that was either significantly miscalculated or deliberately administered. The word deliberately hung in the air like a physical presence, changing everything about the day, about their family, about trust itself. Flores felt her world reshaping around this new reality. Someone had drugged her baby girl, and there was only one person who could have done it. Maya stirred again, this time managing to open her eyes and focus on Flores's face for a brief moment before exhaustion claimed her again. But in that moment of connection, Flores saw her daughter fighting through whatever had been done to her, and she felt a fierce protectiveness rise up like a tidal wave. Someone had used Maya as a pawn in some twisted game, and Flores was going to make sure they faced every consequence the law would allow. But first, she needed to understand why. What could possibly motivate someone to drug a helpless toddler? The question would haunt her for days to come, but the answer, when it finally emerged, would be more disturbing than anything she could have imagined. The pediatric intensive care unit at Regional Medical Center felt like a different world from the emergency room. Quieter, but somehow more ominous in its controlled calm. Maya had been transferred here 6 hours after the blood test results confirmed the diphenhydramine poisoning, her small form looking even tinier surrounded by the sophisticated monitoring equipment that tracked every heartbeat, every breath, every vital sign.
Flora sat in the uncomfortable vinyl chair beside Maya's bed, her body aching from exhaustion but her mind refusing to rest. She'd been awake for nearly 24 hours now, running on pure adrenaline and terror, watching her daughter's face for any sign of improvement. The Benadryl was slowly leaving Maya's system, but Dr. Chen had explained that children metabolize medications differently than adults, and the recovery process could take days. Miguel had gone home briefly to shower and gather supplies, clean clothes, phone chargers, and Maya's favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, which now sat on the bedside table like a loyal guardian. Flores hadn't wanted him to leave, but they both knew one of them needed to maintain some semblance of normalcy while they navigated this nightmare. The morning sun streamed through the hospital room's large windows, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Flores found herself thinking about routine, about the comfortable predictability of their life before yesterday. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months, she'd followed the same pattern. Wake up at 6, shower while Miguel got ready for work, prepare Maya's diaper bag and bottles, dress her daughter in whatever cute outfit Carmen had specifically requested. Something photogenic, Flores. I like to document our activities. She'd always been grateful for Carmen's help. As a single-income family, Miguel's construction wages barely covered their rent, groceries, and basic necessities. Flores' part-time position at Dr. Martinez's dental practice was supposed to supplement their income and eventually lead to full-time work with benefits. Carmen's free childcare had seemed like a godsend, especially since professional daycare would have cost more than Flores earned. Now she realized how naive she'd been, how she'd mistaken Carmen's intensity for dedication, her criticism for caring. The warning signs had been there all along, but Flores had chosen to interpret them charitably, rather than confront the uncomfortable possibility that her sister-in-law was judging every aspect of their parenting. You know, Flores, Carmen would say while adjusting Maya's clothes or retying her hair ribbon, consistency is so important at this age. Children thrive on routine and proper boundaries. The implication was always clear. Flores wasn't providing enough structure, enough educational stimulation, enough organic food, enough developmental toys. Carmen's house had become a shrine to perfect parenting. Color-coordinated toy bins, organic cotton, everything, educational posters on the walls showing letters and numbers and shapes. She'd installed special lighting that she claimed was better for Maya's developing eyes, bought a high-end air purifier for optimal air quality, and maintained detailed logs of everything Maya ate, every diaper change, every developmental milestone. "I'm just trying to help," Carmen would say when she presented these logs to Flores at pickup time. "You work such long hours, and it's easy to lose track of important patterns. Look here, I've noticed Maya's afternoon fussiness corresponds with her protein intake. You might want to consider adjusting her lunch routine." Flores had felt grateful for the attention to detail, even when it made her feel inadequate. She was 23 years old, had been thrust into motherhood when her birth control failed, and was constantly second-guessing herself. Carmen was 31, college-educated, married to a successful accountant, and seemed to have infinite time to research every aspect of child development. What Flores hadn't realized was that Carmen's help was actually a systematic campaign to undermine her confidence as a mother. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand, her expression more optimistic than it had been the night before. "Good morning, Flores. Maya's vitals are looking much better. Her heart rate has normalized, and the drowsiness is beginning to lift." As if summoned by the doctor's words, Maya's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Flores with more clarity than she had shown since the crisis began. "Mama," she whispered, her voice hoarse but unmistakably her own. Flores felt tears streaming down her face as she leaned over the bed rail. "Hi, baby girl. Mama's here. You're safe now."
Maya attempted to sit up, confused by the tubes and wires attached to her small body. "Ellie?" she asked, looking around for her stuffed elephant. "Mr. Peanuts is right here, sweetheart." Flores carefully lifted the beloved toy and placed it within Maya's reach. "Daddy brought him for you." Dr. Chen smiled, making notes on her chart. "This level of alertness is exactly what we want to see. Maya, can you tell me your name?" "Maya Rodriguez," the toddler replied solemnly, then added, "I'm 2, holding up the wrong number of fingers in the endearing way that always made Flores laugh. "You're almost 2, Flores corrected gently, kissing Maya's forehead. "Your birthday is next month." Sandra Williams and Maria Santos arrived shortly after, their faces reflecting relief at Maya's improved condition, but also carrying the weight of new information they needed to share. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we've completed our initial interview with your sister-in-law," Sandra said, settling into the second visitor chair. "I need to inform you that she's admitted to giving Maya medication." Flores felt her blood turn to ice. She admitted it? Maria nodded, her expression grim. Carmen confirmed that she administered what she called a small dose of children's Benadryl to help Maya sleep. She claims it was for Maya's own good, that she was being fussy and needed to learn proper sleep habits. "A small dose?" Dr. Chen interjected. "The levels in Maya's system suggest she received at least 3 times the recommended dose for her age and weight. That's not a mistake. That's dangerous." Sandra consulted her notes. Carmen stated, and I quote, "Flores has never learned how to properly manage Maya's behavior. The child is undisciplined and overstimulated. Sometimes you have to take decisive action to teach both the parent and the child proper boundaries." Flores felt sick to her stomach. "She drugged my baby to teach me a lesson?" According to her statement, yes, she believed that by demonstrating how calm and well-behaved Maya could be with proper management, she could show you more effective parenting techniques. Miguel chose that moment to return, his arms full of coffee and breakfast sandwiches from the hospital cafeteria. He stopped short when he saw the CPS workers, reading the tension in the room immediately. "What's happened?" he asked, setting down his purchases and moving to Maya's bedside. "Daddy!" Maya reached for him with both arms, and Miguel carefully gathered her into a gentle hug, mindful of her IV line. Carmen admitted to drugging Maya. She says she was trying to teach me how to parent. Miguel's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a rage that Flores had never seen before. She what? She could have killed her. Miguel, Sandra said calmly, we understand your anger, but right now, we need to focus on the legal proceedings and Maya's continued safety. Maria opened her briefcase and withdrew several documents. We've obtained an emergency restraining order preventing Carmen from having any contact with Maya or your family. We've also initiated criminal charges, reckless endangerment of a child, administration of a controlled substance to a minor, and child abuse. Flores stared at the papers, trying to process the legal terminology that was reshaping her family's reality. What about Tony, Miguel's brother? Did he know? Our investigation suggests he was not involved. In fact, when we informed him of the charges, he was shocked and cooperated fully with our inquiry. He's provided a statement indicating that Carmen had become increasingly obsessed with parenting techniques and had expressed frustration with what she perceived as your permissive approach to childcare. Maya had fallen back asleep in Miguel's arms, exhausted by the brief interaction, but looking more peaceful than she had since the ordeal began. Flores watched her daughter's face, so innocent and trusting, and felt a complicated mixture of rage and heartbreak. I keep thinking about all the times I thanked her, Flores said quietly, all the times I felt guilty for not being as organized or as educated as she was. She made me feel like I was failing Maya, and then she used that to justify hurting her. Dr. Chen reviewed Maya's latest test results. The good news is that Maya appears to be recovering well. Children are remarkably resilient, and there don't seem to be any lasting physical effects. However, I'd recommend following up with her pediatrician about potential psychological impacts and sleep disturbances. Maria Santos leaned forward compassionately. Flores, I want you to understand that none of this was your fault. Carmen's actions were not those of a caring family member trying to help. They were deliberate and calculated. She exploited your trust and your natural parenting anxieties to justify endangering your child. Flores nodded, but the guilt was still there, a heavy weight in her chest. She thought about all the small moments when she'd felt Carmen's disapproval, all the times she'd questioned her own instincts because Carmen seemed so confident, so knowledgeable. She always made me feel like I didn't know what I was doing, Flores admitted. Like Maya deserved better than what I could give her. I work at a dental office, I clean teeth. I didn't go to college, and I got pregnant when I wasn't ready. Carmen has a degree in child development. She seemed like she actually knew what she was talking about. Miguel shifted Maya carefully, stroking her hair. You're an amazing mother, Flores. Look at her. She's happy, she's healthy, she's smart and funny and loving. Carmen was jealous, that's all. She couldn't have her own baby, so she decided to take over ours. Sandra made additional notes. We'll need you to document any other incidents where Carmen overstepped boundaries or made concerning statements about Maya's care. Even small things that seemed odd at the time could be relevant to the prosecution. Flores closed her eyes, mentally reviewing the past 6 months. There had been so many incidents she'd dismissed or rationalized. Carmen changing Maya's clothes because the ones Flores chose were inappropriate for photographs. Carmen implementing new dietary rules without consulting them. Carmen creating elaborate schedules and behavioral charts that made Flores feel like she was failing some invisible test. She always took pictures constantly, Flores remembered, always staging them, posing Maya in specific ways, talking about creating the perfect documentation of early childhood development. She said she was building a portfolio to show other parents proper techniques. Maria's expression darkened. We'll need to examine those photographs as part of our investigation. Did she ever post them online or share them with others? I don't know, Flores admitted. She always said they were for educational purposes, but I never saw where they went. Maya stirred again, opening her eyes and looking around the room with growing awareness. She seemed to be processing the unfamiliar environment, the medical equipment, the presence of strangers. Where, Carmen? Maya asked, suddenly, her voice small and confused. Flores felt her heart break a little more.
Even after what Carmen had done, Maya was looking for her, conditioned to expect Carmen's presence on the days when Flores worked. "Carmen isn't here, baby," Flores said gently. "She's not going to watch you anymore. From now on, it's just going to be Mama and Daddy and people who love you very much."
We've uncovered some additional evidence that expands the scope of our investigation. I can't go into details over the phone, but I think you need to see what we've found. Miguel was at work, and Flores' mother wasn't arriving from Phoenix until the weekend. She couldn't bring Maya to a police station, and she couldn't leave her with anyone else. The thought of letting her daughter out of her sight made her panic. "Can my husband meet us there? I don't have childcare, and I can't leave Maya with anyone else right now." Detective Harrison's voice softened. "Of course, we have a family room here where Maya can play while we talk. Bring whatever she needs to be comfortable." 3 hours later, Flores and Miguel sat in a sterile conference room at the police station, while Maya played with toys in an adjacent room under the watchful eye of a female officer who specialized in cases involving children. Through the one-way window, Flores could see her daughter building towers with blocks, blissfully unaware of the adult conversation happening mere feet away. Detective Harrison, a woman in her 40s with graying brown hair and kind but determined eyes, spread several manila folders across the table. "First, I want to update you on Carmen's charges. In addition to the reckless endangerment and child abuse charges we initially filed, we're adding several more serious charges based on our investigation." She opened the first folder, revealing printed screenshots of social media posts and blog entries. Carmen has been documenting her interactions with Maya on various parenting forums and social media platforms for months. She's been presenting herself as Maya's primary caregiver and portraying you, Flores, as an unfit mother who needs her guidance. Flores stared at the images, her heart racing. There were dozens of photos of Maya, sleeping, eating, playing, even being bathed, accompanied by detailed critiques of Flores' parenting methods. The posts were titled with phrases like "correcting poor parenting habits" and "teaching structure to an undisciplined child." "She's been sharing photos of my daughter online without my permission?" Flores' voice was barely above a whisper. "Over 300 photos across multiple platforms," Detective Harrison confirmed. "Some of the content is particularly concerning. Look at this one." She pointed to a blog post from 2 weeks before Maya was drugged. The title read, "Sometimes drastic measures are necessary. A case study in behavioral intervention." The post detailed Carmen's frustration with what she called Flores's permissive parenting style and discussed various methods for correcting problematic behaviors in both children and their inadequate caregivers. Miguel leaned forward, his face darkening. She was planning this. She was documenting everything to justify what she was going to do. Detective Harrison nodded grimly. The post goes on to discuss the benefits of controlled sedation for hyperactive and poorly disciplined children, citing dubious sources and misrepresenting legitimate medical practices. She essentially laid out her entire plan while portraying it as educational content. She opened a second folder. This gets worse. We've discovered that Carmen has been in contact with other parents through these forums, offering her services as a parenting consultant. She's been telling these parents that she can fix their children's behavioral problems through intensive intervention programs. Flores felt sick. Other children? She's done this to other children? We believe so. We've identified at least 5 other families who have hired Carmen as a temporary caregiver or consultant over the past 2 years. We're in the process of interviewing each family to determine if their children were also subjected to unauthorized medication or other forms of abuse.
The detective opened a third folder, revealing a collection of photographs that made Flores gasp. They showed various children in what appeared to be Carmen's house, but these children looked unnaturally calm, with the same glazed expression Maya had exhibited after being drugged. These photos were posted with captions describing remarkable behavioral improvements after Carmen's interventions. Notice the similar physical presentation, the vacant stares, the unusual posture, the unnatural stillness for children of these ages. Miguel stood up abruptly, pacing to the window where he could see Maya happily playing with blocks. Jesus Christ! She's been drugging children for years and calling it therapy?
We believe so. The timeline suggests she's been escalating her methods over time, becoming bolder and more systematic in her approach. Maya's case appears to represent a significant escalation. She administered a much higher dose than we've found evidence of in the other cases. Detective Harrison pulled out a thick stack of printed materials. We've also found evidence that Carmen has been fraudulently representing herself as a licensed child development specialist. She's been advertising services online, charging parents consultation fees, and claiming credentials she doesn't possess. Flores stared at the advertisements, recognizing Carmen's photo alongside claims of advanced degrees and certifications. She told us she had a degree in child development. She has a bachelor's degree in marketing, Detective Harrison corrected. She's never taken a single course in child development, psychology, or any related field. Everything she knows comes from internet research and parenting blogs. The scope of Carmen's deception was staggering. For months, she'd been using Maya as a test subject for her twisted theories about child rearing, documenting her methods online, and building a reputation as an expert based on lies and child abuse. "What about Tony?" Miguel asked. "My brother, did he know any of this?" Detective Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Our investigation suggests Tony was unaware of the extent of Carmen's activities. However, we did find evidence that he suspected something was wrong. We found several text messages between Tony and Carmen where he expressed concerns about her behavior toward the children she was watching. She showed them printed screenshots of text conversations. In one exchange from 3 weeks earlier, Tony had written, 'Carmen, I'm worried about you. You're becoming obsessed with these kids. Maybe you should take a break from babysitting until we figure out our own family situation.' Carmen had responded, 'You don't understand the importance of what I'm doing. These children need help, and their parents are failing them. Someone has to step in and provide proper guidance.' Tony came to the station voluntarily yesterday. He provided us with additional evidence and expressed his full cooperation with our investigation. He has filed for divorce and has requested a restraining order against Carmen." Flores felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness. She'd been worried that pursuing charges against Carmen would destroy Miguel's relationship with his brother, but it seemed Tony was as shocked and horrified by the revelations as they were. The detective opened a final folder, this one containing what appeared to be medical records and pharmaceutical receipts. "We've also discovered that Carmen has been obtaining children's medications through fraudulent means. She's been visiting multiple pharmacies, claiming to be filling prescriptions for various children in her care. Some pharmacists remember her because she was very specific about dosages and would ask detailed questions about side effects. She was researching how to drug children more effectively," Miguel said, his voice hollow with disgust. "The evidence suggests she was conducting what she believed to be scientific experiments on the children in her care, documenting the results and using that information to build her online reputation as a parenting expert." A soft knock on the conference room door interrupted them. The officer who had been watching Maya peered in with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Maya is asking for her mama. She seems a little anxious." Flores immediately stood, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. Through the window, she could see Maya standing by the door, holding Mr. Peanuts and looking around with a slight frown that indicated she was about to cry. "Of course, we can continue this later if needed." Detective Harrison began gathering the folders. "Actually, there's one more thing I need to show you, but I wanted to prepare you first. We found video evidence." Flores froze halfway to the door. Video evidence? Carmen had security cameras installed throughout her house, including in the room where she cared for Maya. She was recording everything, not just for security, but as documentation for her online content. We've recovered hours of footage showing her administering medications to various children, including Maya. Miguel's hands clenched into fists. She filmed herself drugging our daughter? The footage is disturbing, but it's also the strongest evidence we have for prosecution. It clearly shows premeditation and establishes a pattern of abuse across multiple victims. With your permission, I'd like you to review relevant portions of the footage. I know it will be difficult, but your identification of Maya and confirmation of what you're seeing will be crucial for the case.
Flores looked through the window at Maya, who was now pressing her small hands against the glass and calling "Mama" with increasing urgency. The thought of watching someone deliberately harm her daughter, of seeing Maya's confusion and fear, made her feel physically ill. But she knew the evidence was necessary to ensure Carmen faced the full consequences of her actions. "Not today," she said firmly. "I need to process what you've already told me, and I need to be with Maya right now." Detective Harrison nodded understandingly. "Of course. We can schedule another meeting when you're ready. In the meantime, I wanted you to know that the district attorney is treating this as a priority case. Given the number of victims and the severity of the charges, Carmen will likely face significant prison time if convicted." Flores opened the door to the adjoining room, and Maya immediately ran to her, wrapping her small arms around Flores's legs and burying her face in her jeans. "Mama, I want to go home," Maya said, her voice muffled against Flores's leg. "We're going home right now, baby girl," Flores assured her, lifting Maya into her arms and breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's hair, baby shampoo, and the faint sweetness that seemed to emanate from all toddlers. As they prepared to leave the police station, Detective Harrison handed Flores a business card. "My direct number is on there. Call me anytime, day or night, if you remember anything else or if you have questions about the case. Also, I'd recommend contacting Victim Services. They can help connect you with counseling resources for both you and Maya." The drive home was quiet, with Maya falling asleep in her car seat and Miguel lost in thought. Flores found herself replaying every interaction she'd ever had with Carmen, seeing them now through the lens of predation rather than helpfulness. Carmen had systematically undermined her confidence as a mother, making her doubt her instincts and second-guess her decisions. She'd positioned herself as the expert, the savior who could fix her inadequate parenting. And all the while, she'd been using Maya as a subject for her twisted experiments, documenting the abuse and sharing it with strangers online. When they arrived home, Flores carried the still-sleeping Maya directly to her crib, then stood watching her daughter sleep for several long minutes. The familiar nursery, with its cheerful
Yellow walls and hand-me-down furniture felt like a sanctuary after the sterile environment of the police station. Miguel appeared in the doorway, his expression heavy with exhaustion and anger. "How many other families are going through this right now?" he asked quietly. "How many other parents are just finding out that someone they trusted was hurting their children?" Flores didn't have an answer. The scope of Carmen's crimes was still unfolding. But it was clear that Maya wasn't her only victim. Somewhere, other parents were receiving phone calls from Detective Harrison. Other families were learning that their trusted caregiver was actually a predator who had documented their children's abuse online. The phone rang, startling them both. Flores recognized Tony's number on the caller ID and hesitated before answering. "Flores?" Tony's voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "I just wanted to call and... God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what she was doing. If I had known..." "Tony, we don't blame you," Flores said, meaning it. "We're all victims of her lies. The police showed me some of the things they found, the photos, the blog posts. I can't believe I was living with someone capable of that. I keep thinking about all the times I should have questioned what she was doing, all the red flags I missed." Flores understood the guilt he was feeling. She'd been torturing herself with similar thoughts since Maya's hospitalization. "We all miss the signs because we trusted her. That's what predators do. They exploit our trust. I filed for divorce today, and I got a restraining order. I can't be around someone who could hurt children like that. I know that makes things complicated for you and Miguel." "Tony, you're doing the right thing," Miguel interrupted, having picked up the extension. "Our families will get through this. Carmen is the one who destroyed everything, not you." After they hung up, Flores found herself thinking about the other victims Detective Harrison had mentioned. 5 other families, possibly more, all dealing with the devastating realization that someone they'd trusted had been systematically abusing their children. She wondered about those other mothers.
Were they also struggling with guilt and self-doubt? Were they also replaying every interaction, looking for signs they should have seen? Were their children showing signs of trauma, having nightmares, regressing in their development? Maya stirred in her crib, making the soft sounds that indicated she was waking up. Flores leaned over the rail, stroking her daughter's hair as she opened her eyes. "Hi, sleepyhead. Did you have good dreams?" Maya smiled, reaching up to touch Flores's face with her small hand. "Mama," she said simply. And in that word, Flores heard trust, love, and the resilience that would help both of them heal from this trauma. That evening, as they went through their normal bedtime routine, bath, stories, lullabies, Flores found herself treasuring each mundane moment. Carmen had tried to convince her that she was failing as a mother, that Maya needed more structure, more discipline, more educational stimulation. But watching Maya splash happily in the bathtub, listening to her giggle at silly voices during story time, seeing her drift off to sleep clutching Mr. Peanuts, Flores realized that she'd been doing just fine all along. The love she felt for Maya, the instinctive protectiveness, the joy she took in her daughter's development, those were the things that mattered. Carmen's charts and schedules and developmental assessments were just window dressing on a fundamentally flawed understanding of what children actually need. As she turned off Maya's bedroom light, Flores made a silent promise to her sleeping daughter. She would never again let anyone make her doubt her worth as a mother. She would trust her instincts, listen to her heart, and protect Maya from anyone who tried to use her child's welfare as a weapon against their family.
The next few days brought a steady stream of updates from Detective Harrison. The investigation had expanded to include 6 additional families, and the evidence against Carmen continued to mount. She'd been denied bail after prosecutors argued she posed an ongoing danger to children in the community. Local news outlets picked up the story, referring to Carmen as the Facebook mommy blogger who had drugged children while building an online following. Flores found herself fielding calls from reporters, all wanting to know how she felt about her sister-in-law's crimes, how Maya was recovering, whether she planned to sue. She declined all interview requests. This wasn't about publicity or revenge. It was about justice for Maya and the other children who had been victimized. The court proceedings would speak for themselves. On Friday afternoon, Flores received a call from Dr. Chen at the hospital. "Flores, I wanted to let you know that we've been contacted by several other hospitals about similar cases. It appears that Carmen may have been taking children to emergency rooms in different cities, claiming various medical issues and seeking specific treatments." Flores felt her blood run cold. "You mean she was taking other people's children to hospitals?" "We're still investigating, but it appears she was using these hospital visits as opportunities to document what she called proper medical advocacy for children with neglectful parents. She would bring children in with fabricated or induced symptoms, then document how her intervention led to appropriate medical care." The Munchausen syndrome by proxy element added another layer of horror to Carmen's crimes. She hadn't just been drugging children in her home, she'd been taking them to medical facilities, subjecting them to unnecessary tests and procedures, all to feed her twisted need for validation as a superior caregiver. "Maya was never taken to other hospitals while in Carmen's care, was she?" Dr. Chen asked. "Not that I know of, though now I question everything I thought I knew about Maya's time with Carmen. She always seemed fine when I picked her up, except for that last day. We'll be reviewing all local hospital records to identify any visits involving Carmen and the children in her care. If we find anything involving Maya, we'll contact you immediately." That night, Flores called her mother in Phoenix. "Mija, I've been watching the news," her mother said before Flores could even speak. "When do you need me there?" "As soon as possible, Mama. I can't go back to work until I know Maya is safe, and we can't afford for me to stay home much longer." "I'm packing right now. I'll drive through the night and be there tomorrow afternoon." Flores felt tears of relief. Her mother, Isabella, was a retired nurse who had raised 4 children largely on her own after Flores's father died in a construction accident. She was exactly what their family needed right now, someone who could provide competent, loving care for Maya while understanding the medical and emotional complexities of what they'd been through. More importantly, Isabella would never make Flores question her parenting. She'd taught Flores that the most important thing a mother could give her child was unconditional love, and that everything else, the schedules and developmental milestones and educational activities, was secondary to that fundamental bond. As Flores tucked Maya into bed that night, her daughter looked up at her with serious eyes. "Mama, where Carmen?" It was the first time Maya had asked about Carmen since the hospital, and Flores had been dreading this moment. How do you explain to a toddler that someone who cared for them had actually been hurting them? "Carmen isn't going to take care of you anymore, baby," Flores said carefully. "She made some bad choices, and now she has to go away." Maya considered this for a moment. "Carmen gave me yucky medicine?" Flores's breath caught. Maya remembered something about being drugged. Not the full scope of what had happened, but enough to understand that Carmen had given her something that made her feel bad. "Yes, sweetheart. Carmen gave you medicine that made you sick, and that was very wrong. Mamas and daddies are the only ones who give you medicine, and only when the doctor says you need it." Maya nodded solemnly. "No more Carmen?" "No more Carmen. But guess what? Abuela Isabella is coming to visit. She's going to stay with us and take care of you while Mama works." Maya's face brightened immediately. She'd only met her grandmother a few times, but Isabella had made a powerful impression with her warmth, her stories, and her willingness to get down on the floor and play with blocks for hours. "Abuela coming now?" "Tomorrow, baby girl. Tomorrow, Abuela will be here, and we're going to have so much fun together." As Maya drifted off to sleep, Flores felt a sense of cautious optimism for the first time since the crisis began. They were going to be okay. Maya was resilient, their family was strong, and they had people who loved them unconditionally. Carmen had tried to destroy their confidence and their peace of mind, but she had ultimately failed. The truth was coming to light, justice was being served, and healing could finally begin. But first, Flores knew, they would have to get through the trial and all the painful revelations that would come with it. The hardest parts of this journey were still ahead of them. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday morning in November, 6 weeks after Maya had been rushed to the hospital. Flores sat in the gallery of courtroom 3B, her mother, Isabella, beside her holding a squirming Maya, who was more interested in the echoing sounds of the courthouse than the legal proceedings that would determine her abuser's fate. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver hair and an authoritative presence, had spent the previous week preparing Flores for what they might hear during the hearing. Carmen's defense attorney is going to try to paint her as a misguided but well-intentioned caregiver, she'd warned. They'll argue that she genuinely believed she was helping these children and that any harm was unintentional. Carmen sat at the defendant's table wearing a conservative navy dress and an expression of wounded innocence that made Flores's stomach turn. She looked exactly like the caring sister-in-law who had volunteered to watch Maya, who had brought thoughtful gifts and offered helpful advice. The disconnect between Carmen's appearance and the reality of her crimes was jarring. Judge Patricia Hernandez called the hearing to order, her stern demeanor making it clear that she took these charges seriously. We're here today for the preliminary hearing in the case of People versus Carmen Rodriguez, charged with multiple counts of child endangerment, reckless endangerment, fraud, and child abuse. Detective Harrison was the first witness called. She presented the evidence methodically. The blog posts documenting Carmen's systematic criticism of the parents whose children she cared for, the photos showing children in various states of sedation, the fraudulent credentials and pharmaceutical purchases. In total, we've identified 8 families whose children were subjected to unauthorized medication while in the defendant's care.
Carmen's defense attorney, a young man named David Chen, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, attempted to cross-examine Detective Harrison about the validity of the online evidence. Isn't it possible that Ms. Rodriguez was simply documenting her observations as a concerned caregiver?
that these blog posts represent legitimate concerns about child welfare rather than evidence of criminal intent. Detective Harrison's response was crisp and decisive. Mr. Chen, in one of her blog posts dated 3 weeks before Maya Rodriguez was hospitalized, your client wrote, and I quote, "Sometimes parents are so resistant to proper discipline that more direct intervention becomes necessary. Children who are denied structure through conventional methods may require chemical assistance to achieve the calm, focused state necessary for learning. That's not documentation of concern. That's premeditation of child abuse." The gallery, which included parents of the other victims, stirred with murmurs of outrage. Flores recognized several faces from news reports. Other mothers and fathers who had trusted Carmen with their most precious possessions, only to discover they'd handed their children over to someone who saw them as subjects for twisted experiments. ADA Walsh called her next witness, Dr. Patricia Chen from the hospital. The pediatrician's testimony was clinical but damning. The levels of diphenhydramine found in Maya Rodriguez's blood were consistent with an adult dosage, administered to a child weighing approximately 25 pounds. This represents a dosage nearly 4 times higher than would be considered safe for a child her age. At these levels, the risk of respiratory depression, cardiac complications, and potentially fatal outcomes is significant. Dr. Chen went on to explain that based on their review of hospital records from surrounding counties, they had identified at least 12 additional cases where Carmen had brought children to emergency rooms with fabricated or induced symptoms. In each case, Ms. Rodriguez presented herself as either the child's aunt or family friend, claimed the parents were unavailable, and provided detailed but inconsistent medical histories. She would then document these hospital visits on social media as examples of her superior advocacy for children whose parents allegedly neglected their medical needs. The scope of Carmen's systematic abuse was staggering. She'd been operating across multiple counties, using different names and backstories, building a network of medical professionals who unknowingly became part of her elaborate fiction. Maya grew restless during Dr. Chen's testimony, and Isabella quietly took her out to the hallway. Flores remained in her seat, forcing herself to listen to every clinical detail about how close she'd come to losing her daughter. The next witness was Sarah Mitchell, a mother from the neighboring county whose 3-year-old son had been cared for by Carmen 2 months before Maya's case. Sarah's testimony was emotional and powerful. "I was a single mother working 2 jobs," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "Carmen contacted me through a parenting group on Facebook offering affordable childcare. She seemed so knowledgeable, so caring. She would send me detailed reports about Tyler's day, photos of him engaged in educational activities, charts showing his developmental progress." She described how Tyler began exhibiting strange behaviors after several weeks in Carmen's care: extreme lethargy, difficulty waking up, and what Carmen described as remarkable improvements in focus and compliance. "I thought Tyler was finally adjusting to having structure in his life. Carmen kept telling me how much better he was doing with proper guidance, how his hyperactivity was being channeled into productive learning. I was grateful that someone finally understood how to handle him." The prosecutor guided Sarah through the timeline of Tyler's symptoms and Carmen's increasingly bizarre explanations for his behavioral changes. She started suggesting that Tyler might have ADHD or other developmental issues that required professional intervention. She offered to take him to specialists to help me navigate the medical system. I thought she was being incredibly generous with her time and expertise. It became clear that Carmen had been following the same playbook with each family, positioning herself as an expert, gradually undermining the parents' confidence, documenting the children's artificially induced calm behavior as evidence of her superior methods, then expanding her role to include medical advocacy that allowed her to subject the children to unnecessary procedures and tests.
Carmen's defense attorney attempted to redirect Sarah's testimony, suggesting that her son might have had legitimate behavioral issues that Carmen was trying to address through unconventional but well-intentioned methods. Sarah's response was fierce and clear. "Mr. Chen, my son was a normal, energetic 3-year-old who loved trucks and dinosaurs and running around the playground. Carmen drugged him into a zombie-like state and then convinced me that this was an improvement? There's nothing well-intentioned about that." The morning session concluded with testimony from 2 more parents, each describing similar patterns of manipulation and abuse. During the lunch recess, Flores found herself in the courthouse cafeteria with several of the other families, drawn together by their shared trauma and anger. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "The hardest part," said James Sullivan, whose twin daughters had been in Carmen's care, "is that she made us complicit. She convinced us that our children were problems that needed to be fixed, and we thanked her for fixing them." His wife Maria nodded emphatically. She had detailed explanations for everything. When the girls started sweeping more, she said it showed they were finally feeling secure. When they stopped running around and playing, she said it meant they were developing better focus and self-control. Flores listened to these other parents describe experiences that mirrored her own so closely, it was eerie. Carmen had used the same phrases, the same manipulative techniques, the same gradual erosion of parental confidence with each family. "She made me feel like I didn't know my own daughter," Flores admitted. "Every pickup time became a report card on my failures as a mother, with Carmen as the expert who was generously helping me do better." The afternoon session brought more devastating revelations. ADA Walsh introduced video evidence from Carmen's home security system, warning the gallery that the footage was disturbing and that anyone who preferred not to watch should step outside. Most of the parents remained, though several covered their eyes during particularly difficult portions. The videos showed Carmen administering liquid medication to various children, using droppers and syringes, often while the children were already drowsy or actively resisting. In one clip, Maya could be seen pushing away Carmen's hand as she tried to force liquid Benadryl into her mouth. Carmen's response was to hold Maya's nose closed until she was forced to swallow, all while maintaining a pleasant expression and speaking in the sing-song voice typically reserved for toddlers. "That's good, Maya. This will help you be a calmer, better-behaved little girl. Mommy will be so proud of how well you're learning to follow directions." Flores felt nauseated watching her daughter being force-fed medication, while Carmen spoke about helping her become more compliant. The violation of trust was complete and absolute. Carmen had used Maya's natural affection and obedience against her, turning medication time into a twisted game of compliance training. Perhaps most disturbing were the videos that showed Carmen staging photos and videos for her online content. She would position sedated children in educational poses, sitting quietly with books, playing calmly with toys, eating meals without fuss, then photograph them for her blog posts about successful behavioral interventions. She was essentially creating propaganda, ADA Walsh explained to the court, using these drugged children as props to support her fraudulent claims about superior parenting methods. Carmen's defense attorney made several objections during the video presentation, arguing that the footage was prejudicial and that his client's intent couldn't be determined from the videos alone. Judge Hernandez overruled each objection, stating that the systematic nature of the abuse was clearly established by the evidence. The hearing's final witness was Tony Rodriguez, Miguel's brother and Carmen's soon-to-be ex-husband. His testimony was perhaps the most painful for Flores to hear, as it revealed how thoroughly Carmen had deceived everyone in their family circle. "I thought she was going through some kind of nest-in phase," Tony admitted, his voice hollow with guilt and exhaustion. "She'd always wanted children, and when we started having fertility issues, she became obsessed with other people's kids. I thought volunteering to babysit was her way of channeling that maternal energy while we figured out our own family situation." Tony described how Carmen's behavior had become increasingly erratic over the past year, with her spending hours each day on parenting forums and mommy blogs, accumulating detailed theories about child development that she would recite like academic lectures. She started treating childcare like a research project. She would take detailed notes about everything: what the kids ate, how they slept, their moods, their reactions to different activities. She said she was building a database of best practices that would help her when we had our own children. The prosecutor asked Tony about Carmen's financial situation and her motivations for expanding her childcare services to families outside their immediate circle. She was charging consultation fees, Tony revealed. Parents would pay her to evaluate their children's behavior and recommend interventions. She was making decent money, and I thought it was legitimate. She seemed so knowledgeable, and the parents were satisfied with her work. What Tony hadn't realized was that the parents' satisfaction was based on their children's artificially induced compliance, achieved through systematic drugging rather than any legitimate childcare expertise. "Did your wife ever discuss using medication to manage children's behavior?" ADA Walsh asked. Tony hesitated, clearly struggling with the implications of his answer. He talked about how over-medicated children were in general, how parents used things like Benadryl as a crutch instead of addressing underlying behavioral issues. He said he could achieve the same calming effects through proper structure and boundaries. But he never mentioned actually administering medication to the children in her care? Never? If she had, I would have stopped her immediately. I had no idea what she was really doing. Carmen's defense attorney used his cross-examination to portray Tony as an unreliable witness who was trying to distance himself from his wife's actions to protect himself from potential charges. But Tony's obvious anguish and cooperation with the investigation made his testimony credible and compelling. During redirect examination, ADA Walsh asked Tony about Carmen's online activities and social media presence. She spent hours every day on parenting websites and forums. She would read research studies, participate in discussions about child development, and post detailed analyses of various parenting techniques. I thought it was educational, preparation for when we had our own children.
Did she ever mention that she was posting about specific children she was caring for? Tony's face crumpled. She showed me some of her blog posts, but she said they were anonymous case studies based on composite observations. She claimed she was contributing to the broader understanding of child development by sharing successful intervention strategies. Did you recognize any of the children in the photos she posted? Not at the time. She said she used stock photos or images from other sources to protect the family's privacy. I never imagined they were actual photos of Maya and the other children she was supposed to be caring for. By the end of Tony's testimony, the scope of Carmen's deception was clear. She'd managed to convince her own husband, her extended family, and multiple sets of parents that she was a childcare expert, while systematically abusing the children in her care and documenting that abuse for online consumption. Judge Hernandez called a brief recess before hearing closing arguments. In the hallway, Flores found herself face-to-face with Carmen for the first time since Maya's hospitalization. Carmen looked directly at her with what appeared to be genuine confusion and hurt. "Flores, I hope you understand that everything I did was for Maya's benefit. She was such a spirited child, and I was trying to help her develop better self-control. I never meant for her to get sick." The casual, almost conversational tone of Carmen's statement was perhaps more chilling than any dramatic outburst would have been. She genuinely believed that drugging Maya had been a reasonable parenting intervention, that nearly causing fatal respiratory depression was an acceptable risk in service of behavioral modification. Flores felt a surge of protective rage.
But before she could respond, ADA Walsh appeared and guided Carmen away from the family members. "Miss Rodriguez, you shouldn't be speaking to the victims outside of official proceedings." Carmen's expression shifted to one of wounded innocence. "I was just trying to explain that there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I would never hurt Maya or any of the other children. I was trying to help them become better versions of themselves." That phrase, "better versions of themselves," stayed with Flores throughout the closing arguments. Carmen had looked at Maya, at all the children in her care, and decided they needed to be fundamentally changed, that their natural energy and curiosity and occasional defiance were problems to be solved rather than normal developmental behaviors to be guided and nurtured. In her closing statement, ADA Walsh summarized the evidence. Systematically, she listed the premeditated blog post, the systematic drugging of multiple children, the fraudulent credentials and medical manipulation, the financial exploitation of vulnerable families. Carmen Rodriguez didn't see these children as individuals deserving of care and protection. She saw them as subjects for her experiments, props for her online content, and evidence of her superior parenting theories. The systematic nature of her abuse, the calculated deception involved, and the life-threatening risks she imposed on innocent children demonstrate a pattern of criminal behavior that demands serious consequences. Carmen's defense attorney made a final attempt to portray her client as misguided rather than malicious, arguing that she genuinely believed she was helping the children and that any harm was unintentional. Judge Hernandez was not persuaded. The evidence presented today demonstrates systematic, premeditated child abuse involving multiple victims across an extended time period. The defendant's claims of good intentions are contradicted by her own documentation of these crimes and her deliberate deception of both parents and medical professionals. The judge ordered Carmen to stand trial on all charges, denied her request for reduced bail, and issued additional protective orders preventing her from having any contact with children under the age of 18. As the court session ended and Carmen was led away in handcuffs, Flores felt a complex mixture of relief and continued anxiety. The preliminary hearing had established that there was sufficient evidence to proceed with prosecution, but the full trial would likely be months away. And there was always the possibility that Carmen might be acquitted or receive a lenient sentence.
Outside the courthouse, several of the victim families gathered spontaneously, drawn together by their shared experience and the relief of having their stories officially acknowledged and validated. "I keep thinking about all the times I thanked her," said Sarah Mitchell, whose son Tyler was among Carmen's earliest victims. "All the times I told my friends how lucky I was to have found such a dedicated caregiver." The recognition that they'd all been systematically manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit parental anxieties was both validating and deeply disturbing. Carmen had studied them as carefully as she'd studied their children, identifying their insecurities and using them as leverage to gain access and compliance. Maya, who had spent most of the hearing playing in the courthouse childcare facility, seemed unaware of the significance of the day's events. She ran to Flores with her arms outstretched, chattering about the toys she'd discovered and the snacks Isabella had shared with her. Looking at her daughter's bright, energetic face, Flores realized that Maya had suffered no lasting damage from Carmen's abuse. She was still the same curious, affectionate, spirited child she'd always been. Carmen's attempts to reshape her into a more compliant version had failed completely, leaving Maya's essential self intact and undiminished. The real damage had been to the parents, to their trust, their confidence, their sense of safety in the world. But even that damage was beginning to heal as the truth emerged and justice proceeded through its careful, methodical course. As they drove home, Isabella in the passenger seat holding a sleepy Maya, Flores felt cautiously hopeful for the first time in months. The legal system was working, the truth was being revealed, and their family was moving forward together. The trial would be difficult, but they would face it with the support of the other victim families and the knowledge that they'd done everything possible to protect not just Maya, but all the children who might have become Carmen's future victims. The trial of Carmen Rodriguez began on a rainy Monday morning in February, 4 months after the preliminary hearing that had established the scope of her crimes.
Flores sat in the front row of the gallery, Maya on her lap, coloring quietly in a book as the jury selection process unfolded. At 26 months old, Maya had no understanding of the legal proceedings that would determine her abuser's fate, but her presence felt important, a living reminder of resilience and recovery. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. ADA Jennifer Walsh presented the evidence in chronological order, building a timeline that showed Carmen's escalation from occasional babysitter to systematic child abuser operating across multiple counties. The jury of 8 women and 4 men, most of them parents themselves, listened with visible horror as the scope of Carmen's crimes was revealed. By the time the prosecution rested, they had established that Carmen had drugged at least 15 children over a 2-year period, created fraudulent credentials to expand her client base, and documented her crimes extensively through blog posts and social media content. The financial records showed that she had earned over $30,000 from her fake consultation services, charging desperate parents for advice on managing children she was secretly sedating. Carmen's defense attorney had changed tactics since the preliminary hearing, now arguing that his client suffered from a delusional disorder that made her genuinely believe she was helping children. Dr. Richard Stein, a psychiatrist hired by the defense, testified that Carmen showed signs of obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, combined with grandiose delusions about her expertise in child development.
Ms. Rodriguez truly believed she was providing superior care for these children, Dr. Stein claimed. Her actions, while misguided and illegal, were driven by an authentic desire to help rather than malicious intent to harm. The prosecution's rebuttal came from Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic psychiatrist who had interviewed Carmen extensively. Dr. Foster's testimony was clinical and precise. While Carmen Rodriguez may have convinced herself that her actions were justified, the evidence shows clear awareness of wrongdoing, Dr. Foster testified. She concealed her methods from parents, lied about her credentials, and took deliberate steps to avoid detection. This pattern of deception is inconsistent with delusional thinking and instead suggests calculated criminal behavior. The most powerful moment of the trial came when ADA Walsh played excerpts from Carmen's own blog posts, read aloud by a court reporter. The jury listened in stunned silence as Carmen's words revealed the depth of her manipulation and contempt for the parents who trusted her. Many parents today lack the discipline and knowledge necessary to raise properly behaved children, one post read. They mistake love for permissiveness and wonder why their children are unruly and defiant. Sometimes more direct intervention is necessary to demonstrate proper techniques and achieve desired behavioral outcomes. Another post, written just days before Maya's hospitalization, was even more chilling. I found that certain pharmaceutical interventions can create ideal learning conditions for children whose parents have failed to establish appropriate boundaries. The results speak for themselves: calm, focused, compliant children who are finally able to reach their full potential. Flores closed her eyes as those words filled the courtroom, remembering how Carmen had presented Maya's unusual drowsiness as evidence of improved behavior and development. The calculated nature of the deception was breathtaking. Carmen had turned Maya's drug-induced compliance into proof of superior parenting methods. The defense's closing argument focused on Carmen's troubled childhood and her desperate desire to have her own children, painting her as a tragic figure whose mental health issues had led to poor judgment rather than criminal intent. David Chen, her defense attorney, made an emotional plea for mercy. Carmen Rodriguez is not a predator or a monster. She's a woman whose untreated psychological issues and overwhelming desire to help children led her down a dangerous path. She needs treatment, not decades in prison. ADA Walsh's closing statement was uncompromising. Standing before the jury with photographs of all 15 victims displayed on easels behind her, she methodically destroyed the defense's arguments. Carmen Rodriguez didn't make mistakes, she made choices. She chose to drug children without parental consent. She chose to lie about her credentials. She chose to document her crimes and profit from them. She chose to put Maya Rodriguez and 15 other children at risk of serious injury or death, all to feed her ego and build her fraudulent reputation as a parenting expert. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all 37 counts, including aggravated child abuse, fraud, reckless endangerment, and practicing medicine without a license, Flores felt a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying finally lift from her shoulders. Judge Hernandez scheduled sentencing for the following month, but not before delivering a scathing rebuke to Carmen, who had remained emotionless throughout the verdict reading. Ms. Rodriguez, you systematically betrayed the trust of vulnerable families and endangered the lives of innocent children. Your actions demonstrate a callous disregard for human life and a manipulative personality that makes you a continuing danger to the community. Outside the courthouse, Flores found herself surrounded by the other victim families and members of the media. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt ready to speak publicly about what they'd endured. Carmen Rodriguez stole something from all of us. She stole our confidence as parents, our sense of safety, our ability to trust. But she didn't break us. Our children are thriving, our families are stronger, and justice has been served.
The sentencing hearing 3 weeks later brought a sense of final closure. Judge Hernandez sentenced Carmen to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. The judge also ordered Carmen to pay restitution to all victim families for medical expenses, therapy costs, and emotional damages. The court finds that your actions represent some of the most callous child abuse this jurisdiction has ever prosecuted, Judge Hernandez told Carmen. You weaponized the love and concern of parents against their own children, and the systematic nature of your crimes demonstrates a level of premeditation that demands the harshest possible sentence. Carmen's only statement was brief and continued to show no genuine remorse. I maintain that my intentions were always to help these children reach their potential. I'm sorry that my methods were misunderstood. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence and criminal conviction, Carmen couldn't acknowledge the harm she'd caused or take genuine responsibility for her actions. Maya's second birthday party was held in the backyard of their small rental house, decorated with balloons and streamers that fluttered in the warm spring breeze. Flores watched her daughter run around with the other toddlers, her energy and joy unmarked by the trauma she'd endured. The pediatric psychologist they'd consulted had assured them that children Maya's age rarely retain conscious memories of such experiences, though they'd need to remain alert for any behavioral changes as she grew older. Isabella had decided to stay in town permanently, moving into a small apartment nearby and taking a part-time job at a local clinic. Her presence had been transformative for the whole family, providing not just practical childcare support, but emotional healing through her unconditional love and acceptance. You know what the best part is? Isabella said, watching Maya blow out her candles with determination and delight. She's exactly who she's always been. That woman couldn't change her spirit, couldn't break her joy. Miguel had been promoted at work and was taking evening classes toward his contractor's license. The experience had motivated him to build a more secure future for their family, and Flores had returned to work full-time with the confidence that Maya was in loving, trustworthy hands. The victim families had formed a support group that met monthly, sharing their ongoing healing journeys and advocating for stronger background check requirements for childcare providers. Several parents had testified before the state legislature about the need for better oversight of unlicensed caregivers, and their efforts had resulted in new laws requiring disclosure of any criminal history and mandatory reporting of suspicious behavior. Flores had also become involved with a nonprofit organization that provided support services to families affected by child abuse. She found meaning in helping other parents navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges that followed the discovery that someone they trusted had harmed their children. The hardest thing to accept, she often told new families, is that you couldn't have known. These predators are skilled manipulators who study us as carefully as they study our children. They know exactly how to exploit our love and our fears. As the birthday party wound down and extended family members began to leave, Flores found herself reflecting on how much their lives had changed over the past year. The trauma had been devastating, but it had also revealed the strength of their family bonds and their ability to rebuild trust and safety. Maya ran to her, chocolate cake smeared on her face and birthday crown askew, throwing her arms around Flores' legs with uninhibited affection.
Mama, best birthday ever, Maya declared, her vocabulary expanding daily as she approached her second birthday. Flores lifted her daughter, feeling the solid weight of her healthy, thriving child, and realized that Carmen's attempts to improve Maya had failed completely. Maya was perfect exactly as she was, spirited, curious, loving, and wonderfully, beautifully alive. The nightmares had finally stopped for both mother and daughter. The hypervigilance was fading. Trust was slowly being rebuilt, one careful day at a time. They had survived the worst thing Flores could imagine happening to their family, and they had emerged stronger, more connected, and more grateful for the ordinary moments that made up their daily lives. Carmen Rodriguez's crimes had made national news, serving as a warning to other families about the dangers of trusting caregivers without proper vetting. But for Flores, it would always be Maya's story, a testament to a little girl's resilience and a family's refusal to be broken by someone else's evil. As the sun set and Maya fell asleep in her arms, exhausted from her party, Flores made a silent promise to her daughter. She would never again doubt her own instincts as a mother, never again let anyone convince her that Maya needed to be anything other than exactly who she was. The little girl who had survived Carmen Rodriguez's attempts to reshape her was growing up strong, confident, and deeply loved. In the end, that was the only victory that truly mattered. Thank you for joining us for this deeply personal and difficult story about Maya Rodriguez and her family's fight for justice against someone who betrayed their trust in the most horrific way imaginable.